since inception, and I'm thankful to you, sir, for sparing your valuable time. And of course, our strength of the committee, Dr. J.P. Gupta ji, Chair, Environment Committee, PhD Chamber. Thank you, sir, for always guiding us, the committee, and our co-chair, Dr. J.S. Sharma ji, Mahinder Rastogi ji, and C.P. Kaushik ji, and we are having our steering committee members, Umesh Sadev ji is also here. And of course, Dr. Karen Landmark. Karen, I'm thankful to you, you being a partner in the PhD Chamber in this journey, and we look forward to visit your country in the month of September and move forward in using the clean energy opportunities and how we can strengthen it. And I'm thankful to Mr. Ed Glipsy. I hope I am pronouncing it rightly. Director Greenpeace UK, thank you so much. And Amod, Senior Researcher Climate Policy Group at CICRO. Thank you so much. We are having an panel of experts with us today, and taking it forward, I would like to hear from our President, Mr. Pradeep Multani ji, to start the deliberations of the day, and then over to our Chair, Dr. J.P. Gupta ji. Mr. Multani ji, if you can kindly start. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kanchan Joshi. A good day to everyone. We have today with us Dr. Karen Landmark, Chair of the Board, Greenstat Asia Norway, Mr. Ed Gillespie, Director, Greenpeace UK, Ms. Solveig O'Dott, Senior Researcher, Climate Policy Group at Cicero, Dr. J.P. Gupta, our Dynamic Chair, Environment Committee, PhD Chambers, Dr. J.S. Sharma, Co-Chair, Environment Committee, PhD Chamber, Mr. Mahinder Kumar Rastagi, Co-Chair, Environment Committee, PhD Chambers, Mr. Umesh Sadev, Dr. C.P. Kaushik, Co-Chair, Environment Committee, PhD Chambers, Ms. Kanchan Joshi, Senior Secretary, PhD Chambers, delegates and participants. On behalf of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I am greatly honored and pleased to welcome you all to this roundtable discussion number 1, Post-International Climate Summit 2021. First of all, I would like to express my deep appreciation over the successful culmination of the International Climate Summit 2021, which was organized by Environment Committee of PhD Chamber on 3rd of September 2021 for building India's hydrogen economy. The summit was a precursor to the 26th Conference of Parties, COP, held in Glasgow, and witnessed participation of more than 30,000 registered delegates worldwide, ranging from Nobel laureates to technical experts. In the summit, PhD Chamber had proposed to set up an international hydrogen alliance similar to the International Solar Alliance and Center of Excellences for hydrogen across all the states. A comprehensive knowledge portal on hydrogen was launched at the summit, which will serve as a one-stop information source for research, production, storage, transportation, and application of hydrogen. A knowledge book on self-reliant India, Harness the Power of Hydrogen, authored by Dr. Karen Landmark and a team in Norway, NIRI, and several other organizations, was released during the summit. The proceedings and the summit recommendations have been submitted to the Honorable Prime Minister's office for his kind perusal. Further, I would like to apprise you that PHDCCI Environment Committee has set up a think tank under the chairmanship of Dr. J.P. Gupta, and under his guidance, the committee will be organizing monthly roundtable conferences for technical discussions post-International Climate Summit 2021. Today's session marks the first of the roundtable discussion series. I would also like to congratulate and propose my sincere greetings to our government for tremendous success at the COP26 summit at Glasgow. The visionary targets set for climate change mitigation gives India enough time to reorient its energy consumption from coal to renewable energy. India has surely left an impact on the other nations by setting new climate change mitigation targets. We at PhD Chamber offer our fullest support for the rapid development of our motherland while taking care of our environment. the 5 elixirs announced by our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji will prove to be an exceptional contribution by India towards climate action. We all surely agree with lifestyle for environment, the new mantra for sustainable development proposed by him to ensure peaceful coexistence with nature. Also realizing the urgent need to address the climate crisis world is facing, our Honorable PM has already initiated drastic action by announcing hydrogen mission on Independence Day in witness of a national flag. India has set a target of renewable energy at 450 gigawatt and is well on the path of achieving it. Due to the lowest cost of the renewable energy, India definitely stands at a better footing to produce hydrogen at the lowest cost as compared to the other countries, and therefore India is poised for a hydrogen export hub. The government is also encouraging the adoption of hydrogen fuels and technology for mobility sector. Many industries like steel, cement, and glass manufacturing industries have already started using hydrogen for heating requirements. With the rapid introduction of biofuels, renewable energy, and green hydrogen, India is well poised to take leadership role towards the carbon neutrality. The need of the hour is transformational system change that calls for increased international cooperation. It is clearly apparent that climate crises are interlinked and that we need to deal with them holistically. We all should laud the initiatives taken by the government in its efforts to make India build back better. The transition of green energy and green mobility will be the key enabler in this complex situation, which is already reflected in the climate policies gaining a more central role in the nation's strategy to cut greenhouse gas emissions. The energy transformation involves a transition from fossil fuels to new value chains based on renewable energy. Solar and wind power are renewable energy sources that are the most invested in. Hydrogen clearly has the potential to transform our existing large reliance on fossil-based energy to low carbon and green energy to facilitate process of decarbonization for a net zero transition. There is a necessity for synchronized, unified, computable, sector-specific, and multilateral action on nature over the coming years if we are to achieve our newly set targets. With these words, I feel privileged in welcoming Dr. Karen Landmark, Chair of the Board, Greenstat Asia, Norway, Mr. Ed Gillespie, Director, Greenpeace UK, and Ms. Solveig Amdot, Senior Researcher, Climate Policy Group at Cicero. We hope today's interaction will help us in building a viable roadmap to shield the one and only natural world that sustains us. Thank you. God bless us all.
Thank you, sir, for setting the theme of the event. And as rightly has been said by Mr. Multani ji, that we all need to coexist together. And this is what our ancient literature in India, ancient wisdom had taught us, that there has to be a sustainable development. Now, I would like to call upon Dr. JP Gupta ji, Chair of Environment Committee, to kindly take it forward. Sir, over to you.
Good afternoon, my dear friends. We at the PhD Chamber are extremely pleased to welcome three distinguished speakers: Dr. Karen Landmark, Chair of the Board, Greenstat Asia, and also Director, Business Development and Strategy, Greenstat Norway; Mr. Ed Gillespie, Director, Greenpeace UK and Sustainability Professional; and finally, Ms. Solveig Amdot, Senior Researcher, Climate Policy Group at Cicero for International Climate Research in Oslo. This is the first roundtable discussion post-ICS 2021, and a very special question could be asked why. Because I see it special because I find three international authorities on the subject present to deliberate. Therefore, it's very special first roundtable conference. I offer my gratitude to all three of you for sparing your valuable time with us to deliberate on the important issue. Dr. Karen Landmark has been a key driving force for our successful completion of the International Climate Summit. Without her total support, ICS would have not been possible. She is presently active in working with various agencies in India in setting up Center of Excellences, identifying safety gaps in our existing safety standards, as well as the regulatory mechanism. She has a clear vision for capacity building for our country in the entire value chain in green hydrogen. Dr. Karen Landmark has been creative in her approach and have had the audacity to be innovative for Indian conditions. She blessed with a perfect persona of Eastern mind with Western thought. As you all know, all of us have 75% of hydrogen in our body. We need a very little ignition to make it into energy. I can tell you confidently, there cannot be a better person than Dr. Karen for this job. Mr. Eddie Gillespie is a philosopher, though I do not know him well. But what I could see from his background, he is a philosopher and a original thinker. He is genius to show us the way to the complex problem of climate change. He is an author of the book Only Planet, a flight-free adventure around the world. This book allows the world's flaws and beauty to seep into your soul. 20 minutes time for a lecture may not be adequate. You need a long companionship with him to dissect his mind, to take the complex, interconnected, interdependent nature of the many challenges the world faces, from climate change to disruptive innovations. Mr. Ed Gillespie, I offer my personal gratitude to you for sparing your valuable time to share your pearls of wisdom with us. Ms. Solon Amor focuses on domestic and international climate and energy politics and policies. It's a very difficult job for you, two P's to handle, politics and policies. For large developing countries, particularly Brazil and India, she presently leading an international research project in Indian climate politics financed by Research Council of Norway. Her deep background and knowledge about India is very useful. The resumes of all three of you are almost like a book. I cannot introduce you because I do not know from where to start. Let us join. Now, let us join in a pious journey to transform humanity through knowledge and wisdom. COP26 climate has been negotiations between haves and have not. Please tell me how it can be successful. The basic fundamental of a complex issue, which it affects everyone, if we start with a negotiation, is not a business. Therefore, according to me, we could not achieve much. An agreement reached has been very loose. You know it with respect to the methanes, with respect to your coal, whether phasing out and all, it has been left open. According to me, which I've been deliberating with Dr. Karen, the scientific mind does not so much provide the right answers as to ask the right questions. In fact, entire history of human intelligence is more to do with dealing upon the questions rather than their answers. A question gives direction, and answer closes it. The Socrates, one of the the greatest philosopher, Greek philosophers, mentioned this 3,000 years ago. Mr. Ed Gillespie is expected to take us through ancient wisdom to search for answers for decarbonization. I see him a messiah of have-nots. With my these few words, I conclude and give this forum to my distinguished guest to start with Karen. Finally, I would like to tell you, the PhD Chamber of Commerce offers a very important platform, not only for our Indian business companies, but because you are the integral part in the journey of decarbonization in India. This chamber is your chamber. You can use it the way you like it. Your cluster of companies from Norway could become the members of the chamber, and they can use all the facility of the chamber, as well as any suggestions which you offer. If it goes to the chamber from our president to the government, it has got a special attention from the government. With these few words, I offer this to Dr. Karen and Gillespie and last speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. It's such an honor and a privilege to speak to you all today. And I must say, dear Dr. Gupta, that your words are so kind, and we feel the same way, of course, with the collaboration we have with you and everything that you are willing and able to share with us. So thank you from my heart for that generous introduction. We will, the three of us, approach the theme of this roundtable, and I will start. And I will spend some time in the beginning giving a business perspective of the context for the cooperation with the PhD committee, and also a little bit on Greenstat's work and values and the way that we approach the serious context that we are in. And as Dr. Gupta rightly said, I work for a company called Greenstat. And for those of you who doesn't know us, Greenstat is a green energy company with its headquarters in Norway. And we work throughout the whole value chain of green hydrogen, from the energy input side with wind and solar to end market applications like green energy filling stations. Easily said, maybe our business model is to build, own and operate green hydrogen plants alone, but preferably in partnerships with others. Over the last 2 years, we have entered the Indian market, and we believe we have brought with us some relevant knowledge of hydrogen in particular. The production of hydrogen has a 100-year-long history in Norway. And that, as you said, Dr. Gupta, along with safety and security measures that has been developed and standardized over decades by Norwegian industry partners, is something that we, with great humbleness related to the level of knowledge and competencies that India possess, we believe that we can offer in these early and defining years for building a green hydrogen industry in India and globally. We have a strong focus on cooperation, and we have signed several strategic MOUs with Indian companies and NGOs. Together with Team Norway, which is the embassy and other partners and Indian partners, we have, as also referred to by Dr. Gupta, taken the initiative to establish Center of Excellence for Hydrogen. And that builds its existence on 3 pillars: cooperation on business development, cooperation on R&D related to renewable energy and hydrogen, and the strengthening of the bilateral cooperation between India and Norway. The idea behind this Center of Excellence is that it should offer webinars and courses. It should offer capacity building, and in addition, facilitate business collaboration, and maybe most importantly, develop strategic R&D projects, both within the realm of social science and technology. And because we are so fortunate to work with the Honorable Dr. Gupta, this Center of Excellence Hydrogen has already created strong ripple effects, and several Center of Excellence for Hydrogen within the R&D area is now under development. And it's a privilege to work side by side with you on that, Dr. Gupta. Because the hydrogen economy still needs R&D development and it needs technology transfer. The goal of India being self-reliant reflects the need for rapid R&D and deployment of results, particularly in the areas of electrolyzers, storage, and transportation. I think there's also an urgent need for setting up pilot plants to test technology and to speed up the process of commercialization. We are already in dialogue and cooperation with some of India's leading R&D institutes, and together with leading Norwegian R&D institutes, we will develop relevant R&D projects together. The importance of cooperation is key for the success of creating a more sustainable world. And I know that Mr. Gillespie will ponder this theme in a while. And just to remind ourselves that cooperation is a key element for the success of Homo sapiens as a species. And I believe, as also said by the speakers before me, that an advanced and cross-institutional cooperation is a necessity to speed up the so-called green shift. Because the green shift is really about societal transformation. We're in a situation now where we need to address several issues at the same time, and we don't have time to make many mistakes. As a business representative, I see it as our duty to conduct our business in a regenerative manner, to move beyond sustainability and to start ask the right questions, as also said by Dr. Gupta, what we can give back to Mother Nature. So approaching the main theme of today, I'll just spend a few more minutes reminding ourselves about the context of International Climate Summit and COP26. Mr. Gillespie and Dr. Ormot will further elaborate on the theme. In the month before COP26 this year, people all over the world and every continent had felt impacts of a changing climate, and that's only on 1.1 degrees Celsius global warming, being hit by floods, wildfires, storms, or heat waves. The global climate talks had also suffered due to COVID, which first delayed them for a year, and then it created an uncertainty whether or not COP26 would happen at all. In addition, the economic impacts of the pandemic also cast a shadow with cuts in governmental budgets and pushed many into poverty. This year's COP was seen as particularly important because countries were due to have brought stronger pledges under the Paris Agreement's so-called ratchet mechanism. And that's got to do with that countries would submit new intended nationally determined contributions every 5 years, outlining how much they intend to reduce emissions, and each submission should be more ambitious than the last. Coming into the talks this year, the UK COP26 presidency had set high expectations, calling for the summit to quote unquote, keep 1.5 degree targets alive, with a focus on action to address, quote again, coal, cars, cash and trees. And the reason for keeping 1.5 targets alive is that we know now, without any doubt, that the negative consequences increase dramatically with increased temperature. In the first part of the 6th assessment report published in August this year and described as Code Red for Humanity, the IPCC showed that the world is likely to hit 1.5 degree by early 2030s. And that's 8 years from now. That's almost tomorrow. We don't have much time. So this was part of the background or the context for COP26. And the conference did end with a broad political cover decision referred to as the Glasgow Climate Pact. The Glasgow Climate Pact is calling for renewed efforts to raise ambitions on cutting emissions. There was a lot of talk about climate finance, which is very important, adaptation, and the loss and damage already being caused by global warming. So I will stop here and give the word back to the chair, or maybe to Ed Gillespie. That's up to you, Dr. Gupta. And I look forward to this discussion later. So thank you so much for letting me address you today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I request Mr. Gillespie to take it forward.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very humbling to be joining you all today. I will build on what Karen has just been sharing and talk to you a little bit about my sort of reflections in the aftermath of COP. And I'm calling this brief talk, Only the Impossible is Interesting, because as Karen has said, you know, we have had some success at COP. We are going in the right direction, but we are not going there at anything like the right speed or with the right urgency. And we had these broad themes of coal, cars, cash and trees, although perhaps some of the responsibility must be left at the doorstep of our own Prime Minister, who perhaps failed to do some of the deep diplomatic negotiations that are essential for these big summits to be successful in advance, by picking a fight with Kermit the Frog at the United Nations and referencing the cartoon character Peppa Pig in his recent talks to business. Because if I paraphrase Churchill, I would say, owing to past neglect, in the face of the plainest warnings, we have entered upon a period of danger. The era of procrastination, of half measures, of soothing and baffling expedients of delays is coming to its close, and in its place, we are entering a period of consequences. We cannot avoid this period, we're in it now. Now, Churchill was talking about the gathering storm of the Second World War, but it's very apposite to be in this position. And as Extinction Rebellion protests which have occurred around the world also remind us, this is not a drill, it's not a dress rehearsal. And we've had our own impacts in the UK. This is a recent tweet when torrential rain in London managed to flood London Bridge. It's quite difficult to flood a bridge because the water usually rushes over the sides. And as someone said, this is a completely unacceptable disruption to hardworking people's lives. If nature wants people to care more about it, this is totally the wrong way of going about doing things. I even understand there are much more disruptive actions planned, and this is disgusting. So we have to think of these protests as like the smoke alarm. They're very, very annoying in some ways and disruptive, but they tell us our house is on fire. And I describe this as the apocalypse, not in the end of the world sense, but actually in the etymological root of the word, which is the uncovering, the revealing, the drawing back of the veil to see the world as it actually works and to hopefully be able to do something about it. And we talked about this idea. My job as a futurist is not to predict or analyze existing trends, but to stretch the imagination of the possible. And in order to do that, as both Karen and Dr. Gupta alluded to, it is about listening to the real questions the future is asking of us. Because in some ways, having worked on climate change myself for 25 years, it can feel like we have been through long periods of denial and disavowal to a reckoning and a challenge which is coming up at us at great speed. And just as a basic analysis of where COP left us through Carbon Action Tracker, we can see that we've still got policies which are delivering around about 2.5 degrees, around about 2.4. And you can see there is still this huge ambition gap by 2030 on that 1.5 degree, the green band, the Paris Agreement consistent target. So we still have our work to do. And climate change is not like the ozone layer. It's not one thing happening in one place, which is relatively easy to fix through an international protocol. It's not like a war because we're all on multiple sides at the same time. And so it's a war against ourselves. It's not like an intergalactic accident of an asteroid coming at us from outer space because it has a deep history and vested interests. And so it's not a problem to be fixed or solved. It is, in fact, an era, a predicament, which we tend to push aside in the context of not here, not now, not me, not clear. As we all agree, I am sure, it's here, it's now, it's us, it's clear. And as Karen said, it's 1.1 degrees already since 1850. We pretty much get 1.5 degrees in every scenario by 2040. And we're on course for somewhere between 2 and 2.5 on current trajectories. And it's only going to get hotter. I think the debate we are having is how hot we allow it to get. I know in India, you've experienced temperatures which are literally hot enough to melt the asphalt on the streets, which is obviously of significant concern. Perhaps more worrying is the wet bulb effect, where we have the combination of high temperatures with very high humidities, which are conditions beyond human experience. And if anyone has read the novel The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson, you will know the opening chapter, which is a very grueling and difficult read, is based on the idea of a devastating heat wave of that wet bulb effect in India, which kills literally millions of people. So many people talk about this as the doomsday clock equivalent, famously brought around in terms of the context of nuclear Armageddon and nuclear war. In some ways, that can be misleading when we talk about the doomsday clock, because we leave ourselves constantly at 5 minutes to midnight on climate change, where we always feel we have time. That is perhaps an idea of imagined salvation. And some people are now saying if we accepted the fact that we are already at 5 minutes past midnight, we would have a very different response. So I put it to you that we are facing 3 key comfortable myths. One, that we feel we know what's going on and what's going to happen in the next 5 to 15 years. Secondly, that we are in control and that we can tame this. And thirdly, we understand that the leadership is up to the job of doing the task in front of us. And I gave a talk at the Bank of England about 18 months ago, where we talked about very low probability, but very high impact risks, one of which was extreme climate change off the back of the Australian fires. The second was pandemics, and this was pre-COVID. And the third was economic crises. And now we have all 3. And we're familiar with the flattening of the COVID curve, where we bring in protective measures to draw cases down within the healthcare system carrying capacity. But equally, you could apply this philosophy to climate change, where we need protective measures to bring the global temperature shift below 2 degrees. And as the former governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, says, we can't self-isolate from climate change. So in some respects, like The Big Short, the Hollywood movie, which talks about the financial crash of 2008, we are engaged in the big short on ecology, where we do not have the requisite natural capital and ecosystem resilience underpinning our current level of human activity. And that makes us very vulnerable indeed. So we should think about this perhaps as a series of waves. A COVID-19 wave, an economic recessionary wave coming behind that, a climate change wave, and a biodiversity collapse wave coming up in the background. All of these have to be tackled at the same time as societal transformation, as India knows. So flipping those comfortable myths into uncomfortable truths, we have a whole bunch of unknowns coming at us. We are not in control, and it would be arrogant and hubristic to believe that we are. And this is going to be about both leadership and grassroots mobilization. In some ways, this is humanity collectively having to stare up its own fundament, a sort of reckoning that we have to have in order to be able to do things differently at speed and at scale. And I share this cartoon in pretty much every talk I give because I think it encapsulates where we are. It's the ragged trousered businessman talking to the children around the campfire in front of a dystopian cityscape in the background, saying, yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. Now, this is an awkward truth, which makes us laugh, but it makes us laugh because we accept that it is an awkward truth. And we understand why this is all happening. It doesn't matter which of these graphs you look at from the Stockholm Resilience Centre, but you can see that pretty much every trend, whether it's global population or primary energy use, pretty much goes exponential after about 1950. So it is just in 2 generations that this challenge has accelerated to its slightly devastating consequences. And we are still stuck on perhaps a narrative of progress, which is becoming increasingly brittle. We like to think that humanity is inevitably progressing, that we are coming down from the trees and ending up planting trees, that every generation will enjoy a better quality of life than the generation that preceded it. That is increasingly in question by our creation of our own progress traps, where our pursuit of progress is undermining our potential for future progress. And if you like the pursuit of cheap, available, abundant energy in the form of fossil fuels, which undoubtedly can deliver some societal progress, is actually creating an environmental progress trap in the form of climate change, which, as I said, undermines our potential for future progress. And the fact that we have been unable to see that, or at least acknowledge and address that, is to do with willful blindness, because that is a legal principle that you are responsible if you could have known, and indeed should have known, something which instead you chose not to see. And as my colleague at the Forward Institute, where I also work on responsible leadership, Margaret Heffernan, says, the truth won't set us free until we develop the skills, the habit, the talent, but perhaps most importantly, the moral courage to use it. And I think this is what is so heartening about some of the shifts in India, and the ability to use this moral courage, not just the technical scientific knowledge. Because I think we are still confronting a large honesty gap. Certainly the narrative in the UK at the moment is that we will reach some sunlit uplands, we will have a painless transition, there will not be a hair shirt or sacrifice in sight as we navigate this societal transformation. I don't believe, certainly from the UK perspective, that that is true, and that we need to have leadership which shares both the good and the bad news, and to be more honest with us. You will also be aware, of course, that this is not about population. At the moment, it's about consumption. And they're all too quick to put blame on countries like India and China as they develop and pull people up out of poverty. But actually, about 50% of those lifestyle emissions are generated by 10% of the global population. And that's us here in the north. And we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like, who largely don't care. So we also have to tackle the consumption challenge at the same time as the carbon emissions challenge generally. And in some respects, this is about longer term thinking. The Native American, or the First Nation American indigenous practice of 7-generation thinking, of trying to imagine and interrogate your own policies and practices on a 7-generation timescale is useful, but perhaps we need to think of ourselves as a pivotal generation, where we may well be fortunate enough to know our great-grandparents, and also perhaps be fortunate enough to know our great-grandchildren. And that is the span of influence that one life can touch. And the world we will be delivering for our great-grandchildren will be dramatically different to the one we experience, in the same way that our experience is dramatically different to the world that our great-grandparents were raised in. And as Tyson Yunkaporta, the Australian Aboriginal thinker, describes this as the start of a 1,000-year undertaking, because that is how long it will take for the old growth forests to return. So we need some of this cathedral, temple, timescale type thinking that will also address the immediate short term, but have the longevity to be able to think about the impacts on our great-grandchildren. And as Karen said, you know, sustainability is just a stepping stone on this journey from what is a degenerative culture to one which is truly regenerative. As the great sage Sir David Attenborough said just before COP, he said, many individuals are already doing what they can, but the real success only comes through a societal change, both in our economics and in our politics. And the shifting of the dial, if you like, from the left-hand side of this diagram, where we are essentially involved in damage limitation of doing the same things less badly, requires a paradigm shift into actually what is a restorative and regenerative mindset, which builds back that natural capital, which stops this big short on ecology, which brings us into a real sense of living system design, because that future is the only future. It has to be truly regenerative and restorative, because at the moment, the trajectories are basically threefold. We are currently still heading towards an ever increasing state of climate breakdown at 2.5 degrees. The change as usual, incremental shifts will not get us to where we need to be. They will merely delay the inevitable a little longer. What we genuinely have to have is a breakthrough mindset of a transcendence, of a transformation, and something which delivers a complete step change in the way we do things. And for my own training and background as a marine biologist and evolutionary biologist, it's worth reminding ourselves of the mental models of change, because we like to think of change as gradual, as manageable, as painless, as easy transitions, these nice smooth curves of what biologists call phyletic gradualism. But in truth, and what we are likely to be experiencing a lot more of in the coming years, is this punctuated equilibria, which is long periods of stable, very little change, and then rapid shifts where things change very, very fast and very uncomfortably for some players. And underpinning all of that, and again, which is why it's such an honor and a privilege to talk to my Indian colleagues and friends, is that culture is going to be absolutely essential. Those countries which can tap in to a deep sense of heritage or to a deep sense of spiritually connected culture will have an advantage in managing this transition. Because right now, certainly in much of the West and the North, our culture is a bit like a small child with a machine gun. Volatile and highly dangerous. And so we need to be able to overcome some of that and also not revert back to the things we are comfortable with. There was much talk of building back to normal, building back perhaps slightly better, which is a bit like Darth Vader describing the construction of the new Death Star as an amazing job creation and investment opportunity. Well, that it may be, Darth, but unfortunately it also destroys planets. So as Kumi Naidoo, the South African human rights activist and the former head of Greenpeace International, says, what we need is both system innovation, as you guys are talking about in the context of green hydrogen, and that's going to involve system redesign and actually systemic transformation. It is all in, if you like, because ultimately, as the sci-fi writer William Gibson has said, what gives us hope and what gives us a degree of guarded optimism is the fact that the future is out there. It's just not evenly distributed yet. We have the technologies we need to navigate this transition. They are just small scale and in small pockets and very isolated. We also have the finance, but we are not yet deploying the finance into the technologies and the societal shifts which will enable us to transform. And that involves a shift in mindset. Equally, on a more pessimistic note, the collapse is already out there. As the drumbeat of climate disasters starts to accelerate and intensify, it is also clear what a knife edge we are actually on. And so I think for me personally, and for many of us who have worked in this for a very long time, there are a whole suite of emotions which come through when we actually confront the reality of where we are. And we can have anxiety, we can have grief for all that we are losing, a sense of rage or guilt, or even doom and denial. What is critical is not to engage in the psychic numbing and allow ourselves off the hook. Because as Vanessa Andreotti, the Latin American writer, says, we often found ourselves between two projected positions, that of projected hope with a degree of sort of techno-optimistic, messianic, revolutionary fervor that climate change can somehow be fixed or solved, against the other cliff edge, which is projected hopelessness, which is the fatalistic resignation or the misanthropic, people-hating type of environmentalism. Where we all have to sit as activists and change makers is right in the middle on a tightrope between those two projections, with humor, with humility, to take ourselves down onto our knees, and also a sense of hyper self-reflectivity, to continue to ask ourselves and one another the most difficult and challenging of questions. Because ultimately, as we have learned through all of history, whether it's the civil rights movement, whether it's human rights globally, whether it's through the COVID pandemic, or whether it's through climate change, none of us are safe until all of us are safe. And that is the collective collaborative endeavor of which we are all a part. And in that notion, COP26 is absolutely essential, even if disappointing, because that process, that United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, is the most important element of multilateralism we still have globally. We've seen some of the flaws in our thinking around collaboration in the COVID pandemic and vaccine apartheid, but the imperfect nature of COP does not deter from the fact that it is still the best and only game in town. So we have to accept its flaws and still continue to work with it as we go forward. Because ultimately, as the philosopher Ivan Illich said, the desirable future depends on our choosing a life of action over a life of consumption, where we can engender lifestyles which allow us to be spontaneous and independent, yet related and connected to one another, both locally and globally, rather than lifestyles which only allow us to produce and consume. And so I leave you with this idea of not looking away from this challenge. As Greta Thunberg, with her autistic spectrum gift, is unable to look away from the climate challenge, this is ultimately about relationship. This is about our relationship with ourselves, with one another, and with the wider family of life globally. And our innovation and our transformation will come from not looking away from this challenge, but by staring it right in the eye with open hearts and open minds and following the instinct of our guts. Because, as I said, only the impossible is interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening.
Mr. Gillespie, excellent presentation, and gave a new dimension, new perspective to this problem. And let's see how we can move it forward. And I expected, and I got it on similar lines. And we are also thinking in India to make it a mission that apart from the scientific knowledge, there is something else, cultural heritage and ancient wisdom. We do provide answers to many things which science still cannot. So therefore, I am of the opinion, apart from the science and green energy and all, there has to be a change in mindset. Like consumption is a change of mindset. The importance of Mahatma Gandhi mentioned that this planet offers enough for the entire mankind, but it cannot meet the greed of a single individual. So similarly, therefore, consumption is the most important thing. But it is a paradox. On one side, you have to produce more. It's the law of economy that you produce more, cost of production goes down, but at the same time, at what cost? The purpose of life should be known. What the purpose of life? If purpose of life is lost, I think economic activity has no relevance. So therefore, this kind of integration is needed, and particularly like genius thinkers like you could play a very important role in this area. I'm really impressed with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe Karen, you could help us to connect to the last speaker.
Okay, of course.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Solveig Aamodt, I know it's pretty hard to jump after Ed Gillespie, but I'm sure that your voice is equally important to listen to. So we're looking forward to hear what you have to say. And thank you so much, Ed. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Dr. Gupta, to President Multani, to Ms. Suchi, to Karen Landmark, and to Ed Gillespie for very excellent introductions to me, and also very good presentations and thoughts and important notes on this subject of climate change. And I'm also so grateful for the invitation to participate today. It's an honor, and I feel really privileged to be speaking to you. And it also makes me miss India. I would really like to travel to India again. It's making it very, this pandemic is making it very hard. So I hope the next time I will be able to see at least some of you in person. A little bit about myself. I'm a political scientist, so we're usually the ones that point to the problems and challenges, and then we leave it up to you business and politicians to to come with solutions. But I work as a researcher at Cicero Center for International Climate Research in Oslo, and we're an interdisciplinary research institute. And we have most of our research is funded by the Research Council of Norway, or the EU, but we also have some commissioned research. And I work mainly with other social scientists, but also with natural scientists. So my background, my scientific background is from political science, but I try to also understand the other sciences and try to connect the dots a bit. We have quite a lot of international collaboration.
I can tell you one thing, madam,
Yes.
you've got a very bright future. You could be the prime minister one day. With your political why not?
But politicians have to be very sure. As a researcher, you're never sure. You always try to investigate more and try to find out.
If researcher occupy the position of a politician, he or she could do a better job.
We'll see. So currently, I'm quite happy with researching, but we also have at Cicero I have also other colleagues that collaborate with Indian researchers. We have a lot of collaboration with TERI for many years. My current project is a collaboration project with TERI School of Advanced Studies. We also have collaboration with the Center for Energy, Environment and Water, with IIT Mumbai and IIT in other cities. And we have much collaboration with my colleagues that work for the IPCC, with Indian scholars there, especially from the Center for Policy Research. And my current project is called In Green. It has the sort of large title, India's Ambitions and Possibilities of Becoming a Global Green Leader. We started the project last year. Some of it builds on my PhD project that was on the more on the large developing countries, India, Brazil, South Africa and China in the climate negotiations. So this is more on Indian domestic policies, but also trying to look at the multi-level. You need the international, the national, and the local or subnational levels, and how these are connected, and how India's work and India's international ambitions are followed up nationally, and also the challenges in implementing climate and energy politics. We especially look at trade-offs between sustainable development goals. So the 17 sustainable development goals that also came in 2015 together the same year as the Paris Agreement. There's a lot of talk about the synergies between the goals, and you can have in India you have the co-benefits that's always part of the climate politics, and the climate policies have benefits in to meeting different political goals. But there are also trade-offs when it comes to climate, energy, and other sustainable development goals, and we want to dig deeper into that in our project. Of course, the COP26 at the international level, I've gotten the question a lot if it was a success or not. And you also mentioned, Dr. Gupta, that it was disappointing, and I think that it's important to also remember that the Paris Agreement pushes the responsibility down from the international level to the domestic level. So it's important to have the international level. It's important to meet. It's important to have a dialogue and keep the diplomacy there. And climate change is quite unique in international relations, that you actually have these yearly meetings on the international and the global governance of climate change. But also, what's the big question now? To me, it's not the net zero 2050, it's what's happening between now and 2030 in each country. And I think to many people outside India, what's going on in India is becoming increasingly important, and increasingly important to know and to understand. And I experienced this myself. I've done research on India since 2012. And the last years, the attention has grown a lot from different actors. And it's also important to speak across countries like this, because there is also a lot of misunderstanding on what India is doing and what India wants. So I'm very privileged to talk to you today. I'm also looking forward to hearing your comments afterwards. Because it's a challenge to all countries to develop a low carbon economy without compromising or increasing the challenges with other sustainable development goals. And research shows that if we think only on climate, we risk increasing and strengthening already existing injustice and unfair power structures. And this calls for a larger and more holistic understanding of low carbon development, on questions of gender equality, on questions of poverty, on questions on water and food and land access, on indigenous people's rights. In Norway, we had a recent Supreme Court decision ruling against a windmill plant because indigenous people's rights were violated in the concession and in the building of that plant. And these kinds of problems will emerge in all countries, also in India. And these are the things that in our project we are trying to dig into, and trying to understand why it happens and how we can prevent it. What kind of processes can we have to prevent conflicts between sustainable development goals? Of course, there are international, there are also national commitments across sectors. And mitigating climate change and even adapting to climate change, it can't be reduced to a question of counting emissions or counting money only. It needs to have a broader perspective. And India has been, as also the previous speakers have mentioned, India has been a global frontrunner on climate justice, on what is now so popular, the just transition term. Indian scholars were some of the first that published internationally on climate justice. And India, compared to Norway, to the EU, has always had a broader perspective on climate change. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that for us. From a European side, climate change has been a lot about science, a lot about counting. But India has also historically argued that climate change is more. Climate change is history, it's relations, it's trust and mistrust, and justice and injustice. And there has been what you call a north-south divide in the climate negotiations, where the north has been quite sticky on the mitigation, on the counting side, while India and most developing countries have argued that this is a broader issue, and more concerns need to be brought in and need to be addressed in the climate solutions that we choose. And I see the negotiations internationally also moving somewhat in that direction, and including a broader focus on sustainable development goals. This does not make it any easier. It makes it even more difficult, because you have to look at different things at the same time. But India is also a country that has an important contribution from outside of politics. India has a business sector that, compared to in many other countries, has been a driver rather than a barrier. to green transition and to low carbon transition. Many solutions have come from Indian business and Indian industry. And India also has a strong civil society that has much of it is independent of the more larger global civil society. And there's been a strong demand from people in India, from the civil society, for a long time, that the solution, as Ed was talking about, we require decisions where we leave no one behind. But from a research perspective, I also have to say that this is difficult. It takes time. Building the processes where you include relevant stakeholder, where everyone feels included, both at the international level, that it's not only to be counted, but also to count in conversations and in processes and in solution making. These processes require time, and we need to start now. Ed clearly showed us that we're in a hurry, but to get to good solutions, we need to start both at local, national, and at the global level to include all voices and all stakeholders, and for them to feel that they have an equal say. Because if we leave some groups behind, we risk having both more protests against climate solutions, and we also risk increasing the unfair structures that are already there. So this is not an easy challenge. Many people said after COP that Modi delivered, and yes, he delivered net zero target. He delivered new national target. He delivered, at least the way I understand it, kind of a marching order to Indian society, to Indian businesses. Maybe not exactly what to do, but more on what not to do. But the implementation remains, and it remains in India, and it remains in Norway, it remains in all countries. And I know that there are discussions now in India on the climate law, on capacity building, and we have to have these discussions, and we have discussions on what do you want to preserve, what can be changed, what can we not change, and how do we get to those decisions, including people, including society, and including important actors from business, from politicians and civil society and research in a good way. For just reducing emissions will not solve all the other problems, but unless we reduce emissions, all the other problems will increase. So that's our challenge, and that's my thoughts to you today, and I'm looking forward to further conversation. Thank you very much.
Madam, I have one question to you. Because in India, we treat world one family, and particularly this fits very well with respect to climate change, because climate change has no geographical barriers. It is borderless. And if this is so, automatically it becomes world one family. If one family is there, question becomes how to everyone talks about the importance, urgency, consequences, they are well known. The beauty of this COP26, according to me, for the first time, all the world leaders joined together, which reflected that they have accepted the importance of this climate crisis. This is in itself a very, very big achievement, according to me. But question comes, every country which are fighting for their basic survival, if we don't produce food, if you start talking to us to produce organic food, everyone knows it's good. But how to feed the millions of people without the nitrogen fertilizer? For us, the role of energy for the growth, not for the GDP number to get richer, but for the basic survival, it's very important. Like for the, in the villages, they need energy. If you don't give them the energy, what they will do? They will burn the woods and all kind of fuel. For us, for our government, for the people, the basic education, the basic food. Now India, we do not have our own fossil fuel available. No crude oil, no natural gas. They're very limited. Our 80% of power generation, 82% is from coal. And our 14% of the power plants are 3-year-old. How to make change? Government has no money. Whatever kind of commitment you take from, therefore, the problem has to be seen from have and have-nots. Importance is known, urgency is known, technology is known. Like in COVID, everyone knows. But question is how to do it. And according to me, there are two things. Even our Indian ancient wisdom will make people for sharing and caring. The very fact on the humanity on the planet, if a part of the planet is dying of hunger, how you can negotiate? You will give food. So this kind of paradigm shift has to be there. The entire thing of this has to be kept. And therefore, we are talking of this problem has to be seen with respect to now you cannot neglect India. Whatever you do, because it's not a problem of India, it's a problem of the entire world. Because we are the third largest emitter of emissions in the world. And if the climate change takes place here, it goes everywhere. The question is that everyone knows the urgency, importance, and everything. But question is that it is a location-centric problem. In Africa, people are dying of, now you know, COVID vaccination. The poor people could not get the vaccination because they did not have the money to buy. They did not have their own R&Ds to make their own vaccine. Similarly here, like India is a developing country, but at the same time, we need money for our health, for others. We do not have money for a rapid change, what is needed to make it below 1.5 degree. And for doing that, you make any kind of negotiation, hours of long meetings and all, but that thing has to be seen in sharing and caring. The moment this kind of mindset of sharing and caring comes, I'm quite sure this could attain a rapid momentum and there could be a success. The beauty that we all know, we have accepted. Earlier days are gone that people are not sure whether climate change is due to the increase in temperature or CO2 increase. This has been accepted. There is no controversy on this account. But question is that it is important for country like developing country like India, for them, for our government, for Mr. Modi, to take care of the basic needs of the people is of the prime importance for any government will be thrown. Because I'm talking with you because you are in politics. Politics related to, I don't mean politics mean you are in active politics, but the political implications of the climate change, this transition period. Therefore, I will be talking with Karen to include, we are going to launch a mission. I am going to write to United Nations Secretary General. My next letter is going to be to them and to even Mr. Modi. And Modi could be the right person to take a lead in this area. Sharing and caring. World One Family. Let's see, and with your knowledge of policies and politics, how you could convert our thought into a mission. And there my request to you, think over how you can make it a mission to make it a sharing and caring so that developing countries, it is the responsibility of the developed countries to take care of the developing countries. Like in a family, if one brother is financially stable, always in India we help others, in the other family members. So this kind of thing has to be become and the integral and inseparable part of all the policies. And I think it will be a new perspective to this problem. mitigation. So these are my few things which I thought to share with you. So because you are the right person to work in this area.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree with very much of what you said. It's a huge. There are so huge challenges in India and in developing countries that we cannot ignore. And I think this is also what's seen when the international negotiations, when you had the COP26 discussions on finance, especially on whether loss and damage should be its own mechanism and have its own fund and its own. You can see the differences in understanding between developed and developing countries, and where developed countries still much understand climate change as a counting exercise about emissions. But as for many, especially the small island states, least developed countries, it's an existential question. And what I see from developed countries is that the question of loss and damage, they use a lot of technical excuses not to have a new a proper mechanism and say that it will be time consuming but it's also a question of assuming responsibility in a way that they have rejected to do in the negotiations until this day, and accepting the climate depth of developed countries is still difficult for developed countries. And I think it's an essential question of trust. And I saw in these negotiations that developing countries bring the mistrust from the unequal distribution of vaccines with them. And promises are not enough. There needs to be concrete action. And this is, to me, it's a problem that mainly the developed countries have the key to solve, and they have not been willing to do it so far. But I also think when I talk to Norwegian authorities, especially the ones that deal with development aid, and they are talking a lot about climate aid, and we're trying to say climate finance needs to come in addition. We cannot have the whole aid budget to climate issues, especially not only focusing on mitigation. There needs to be still finance for other development needs that are the climate finance needs to be on top of the aid that's already given, if it is to have an effect and not increase problems that are already there. Yes, thank you.
I would like to add 2 points. In fact, you would be surprised. India, our honorable Prime Minister, distributed vaccine to many countries, despite we did not have the enough, because he believed in World One family. And similarly, when there was a shortage of chloroquine and other drugs which were manufactured in India, our government opened the all the barriers or geographical barriers, and they showed the way, despite taking the huge criticism from within, how Mr. Modi could do and people are dying and exporting it. But you can believe the mindset of the Indian government that they believed the World One family. Point number 1. Point number 2, you are working like with the research projects on IIT and other. Our PhD chamber have got the very talented scientists as well as economists working here, and any kind of research project which you would like to work jointly with PhD chamber, we would welcome it. Okay.
Thank you very much. I will.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, maybe Mr. Stugi, you could conclude it now.
Yeah, good evening, friends. I think it's been very, very interesting deliberations we had, and I think few things came out very clearly. One thing is that the glass is more than half full. I think we have appreciated the achievements, and there have been, a lot of disagreements and inconveniences as well. But, it's very clear the glass definitely is more than half full. And the other aspect is, I think this has been a loudspeaker for climate action, because I think the kind of the urgency, the society, entire world is facing, even for to exist. So that urgency is very, very clear. And the best part which came out from the discussion, is not only the knowing the problem, but the solution has multifold and the multi-dimensional solution. So on one side, on technological, the solution which the Dr. Karen came out very clearly about the commitment of Norway to India, whether by way of the setting up the center of excellence and doing the capacity building and the other R&D project. So definitely, these kind of the support measures which are kind of a technical technology oriented would definitely help the Indian economy for the decarbonization. And our friend Mr. Gillespie, they came out very strongly and clearly. It's not only the technology which can solve the issue, the softer aspect, whether it is the sensitivity to the essence of the culture, and the highlighting the kind of urgency and other philosophical solution. I think with such a beautiful and the graphical the presentation, and with the statement of all the world, the society and the philosophical leaders, spiritual leaders, and even the management gurus, the very nice quotes which he is they presented, and I think it holds absolutely true in this crisis situation. And the Miss Solvig amount, they came out with the wonderful her the views which are more on the carbon emission, and the role of R&D and kind of the projects that she is doing with many institutions in India. So overall, means it's been very, very interesting and very useful discussions. And we really look forward that, and we have a lot of hopes, the support of Norway as a country, we already done such a large, the international conference, and it wasn't possible without support of Norway government, and especially the contribution of Dr. Karen and Mr. Sterle, through the company Green Step and Innovation Norway. So I think this one of very important in India. In India, this event, the kind of the buzz it has created, the people are talking of the green solution to the crisis situation that we are all faced with. And our president, Dr. Multani, has set the tone of the session very, very nicely, and highlighting the commitment of the Indian government as well as the commitment of the chamber to deal with this challenge. And of course, the worthy and very dynamic the chairman, Dr. J.P. Gupta, has given such a multi-dimension to the problem, including the ancient wisdom. And we are very, very excited and very hopeful that this particular the aspect and which is being shared not only with the Prime Minister of India and even with the United Nations. We are very, very confident that this particular aspect is definitely going to be part of a big solution to the climate change, the problem we are facing. So my special and hearty thanks to all the speakers, Dr. Karen, Mr. Gillespie, and Miss, sorry, I'm forgetting the name, Mr. Solvig, Miss Solvig, thank you very much for your time and sharing the knowledge. And thank you, each one of you, having spared the time and, making the entire discussion very interesting and useful.
Thank you so much.
Last point, we should give a chance if there are some questions from the, you could please, Kanchanji, you could connect for some questions if they are.
I think there's something in the chat box. If you
Yes,
could
there
look at
are questions in the chat box. I will just read some of them. There is one question from Mr. C.S. Vitendra. There is a need for development of technology for growing food cycle from ice-fed area which remains uncultivated or use of snow. And one more question is from Mr. Veera to all the panelists. For existing industries who are releasing 100-ton per day of greenhouse gases emissions, want to become net zero by 2030, which year we need to consider as a baseline year? Is it 2021 or from 21 to 2030?
Okay,
Maybe who would like to take these questions? The expert, Karen, you could decide who.
Yeah, I can
could
decide
handle
the base. I guess the baseline here, Solveig, is under the climate talks is in the 90s. So I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, but do you, Solveig?
Yeah, I'm not a natural scientist. I don't work very much on I work on qualitative data, not so much on quantitative and on emissions data. But there are many of these business initiatives where you can sign up with net zero pledges, and I'm sure they have different calculations and how to calculate it. So I think that depends on which kind of initiative you relate to. I don't know if Ed has more information.
I think Dr. Sharma can probably answer.
It is from the pre-industrial year.
Yes, exactly.
Pre-industrial year.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly the baseline that we use in the UK is
send it to you and reply to all of them. Due to the paucity of time, it may not be possible to answer all the questions. We'll take the question and send it to you for your comments on them. And finally, I would like to invite my guest speakers to visit India and give us a chance to avail the hospitality of Indian food and Indian friends. And with the first opportunity, Mr. Gillespie, please visit, and we will be glad to receive all of you in India.
Thank you so much.
Many thanks to Kanchan, who took all the pain and the trouble to organize this program. And my special thanks to Mr. Knut also, who's joined us from Norway.
I didn't see him.
Right, he's very much there with the.
Okay.
So, and and thanks a lot for your support to this international summit also. You were personally here. And thanks Mr. Umesh Sadevji, who is also here. Thank you very much.
And Multaniji, finally, I appreciate as a president sparing so much time. This reflects that you are lover of nature and you care climate equally to us. At the same time, your presence is a great inspiration to all of us. Thank you very much.
Right. A special thanks to the other co-chairs who's always been, the big support to all the programs, Mr. Kaushikji and Dr. Sharma.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a nice
Thanks a lot.
Have a nice weekend. All of you, nice weekend.
Have a nice
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.